Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 43. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who continues to listen to the show, subscribes, comments, and rates. Your support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guests today. I also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. Owned and operated by active lifters, Cerberus is trusted by the top strength sport athletes and lifters in the world. Cerberus's wide range of products are made by athletes for athletes, truly living up to its moniker, made by the strong for the strong. From sandbags, training gear, and supplements to lifting straps, knee sleeves, and more, Cerberus Strength provides the highest quality strength products on the market, designed and manufactured to help you defeat, destroy, and devour your competition. If you're in the market for the highest quality strength conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to use promo code STRENGTH_GAME at checkout to receive 10% off your next order at CerberusStrength.com. And in this week's episode, I am joined by a former colleague and friend of mine, Kara Concheck Vincent. Kara is the head coach for the women's lacrosse team at the Savannah College of Art and Design. Prior to her joining SCAD in the summer of 2021, Kara was an assistant, then interim head coach and head coach at Fresno State University. She began her coaching career with the Major Force Lacrosse Club in Columbus, Ohio, before working as an assistant coach at Oberlin College and then head coach at St. Francis University. A former 4-year lacrosse athlete at Fresno State University, Concheck completed her career with All-MPSF Academic and Athletic team honors. She was also awarded Team Offensive Player of the Year in her senior season, finishing her career as the all-time leading scorer in school history. Concheck is also certified CrossFit Trainer, in addition to being a competitive CrossFit athlete with her best finish at 328th in North America in 2021 CrossFit Games Quarterfinals. Like I said, I'm excited to have her on the show today and reconnect. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Kara Concheck. What's going on, everybody? Today, I am joined by one of my good friends and former fellow coach, Kara Concheck Vincent now. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Of course. I was never going to do it when we were both at Fresno. So had to wait till you got your new gig, which congrats.
Thank you.
Congrats on the wedding and everything as well. But I'm excited to have you on.
Excited to be here. I'm pumped up.
Hey, so let's hop right into it. You got a very extensive background. So first thing I got to ask you first before we got going is how you actually got involved in the strength game. What kind of sports did you play growing up? And then getting to your position now as a head coach for lacrosse, but also competing in CrossFit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I love competition. I was born to compete. I love challenging myself, pushing myself, and I love growing. I love self-growth. Self-growth. Those are just some of the things that continue to motivate me in my, coaching career, in my competition, in CrossFit. But I grew up playing sports, all different sports, which I was very lucky to be able to be involved in: swimming, soccer, tennis, everything that I could get my hands on, team sports, individual sports. And my dad, actually, he played basketball for Ohio State and professionally. So that was someone that was always an awesome mentor for me, always in my corner, never pushed me in a certain direction, just kind of blue collar mentality. Hey, like whatever you decide to do, put your all your heart into it and, work your tail off, and it is whatever you make of it. So I always appreciated that. I've always been fascinated by the psychology of what breeds competitors. You know what I'm saying? How does one, create or foster that competitive spirit? And I really think upon reflecting on it, it's like modeled behavior from your parents, like watching your parents do different things. Like I just so when I think about my dad, I think about, watching him, run sprints or whatever it might be, and thinking that was so cool, and like just trying to model that and having so much respect for him, and how he got his college paid for playing, in college and professionally making a living out of that. I thought it was awesome. It was something I wanted to do. Lifting wise, I always took pride in, my strength and competing in the weight room. We'd always duel back and forth in college of, let's out clean each other. Let's out bench each other. And I never lifted in high school or anything. So when I got to college, it was all new for me, and never had done any of the Olympic lifts, no compound really lifts either. And so it was all new to me, and it was exciting to learn. After I hung up my cleats in 2014, I was just eager to get involved in something new and different. Like, man, what can I continue to do? Of course, you're excited when you graduate. You're like, I can do whatever I want, or I'm done running for probably 2 years now. Like you just, you might feel a little burnout, but I was just like ready to get my hands into something else. I had always seen CrossFit on TV, and I know it was still fairly new at that point in time, just continually evolving. I was like, I gotta try CrossFit. Like, really, how hard could that be, right? I mean, I'm pretty strong. I thought, no, I got absolutely humbled. My first day of CrossFit, I dropped in at a gym in Oakland, California. I think it was CrossFit Oakland. And I remember it perfectly, because this lady next to me, she was, probably like a stay-at-home mom, not to like stereotype her by any means, but I think that is really what she was. She was just loading up the barbell, and I'm like, okay, what's this place all about? How much weight does she have on the barbell? But it was the workout called DT. It's 5 rounds for time, 12 deadlifts, 9 hang cleans, 6 push jerks as fast as you can. And I got smoked by like a 45-year-old. And I'm like, all right, respect. And so that was like my first introduction into CrossFit. And it can be a little bit intimidating for, anyone who hasn't, had that type of lifting background, or wasn't, any sort of athlete growing up. But nonetheless, I was still a little bit intimidated because I didn't know what to expect. And so the first gym that I actually joined upon graduating, it's called Blind Dog Gym, and it's in Vermillion, Ohio. My friend, who was when I was coaching at Oberlin College, she was a head softball coach, Mimi Mahan, who now owns Mimi Mahan Strength and Fitness in Hamilton, Ohio. She was like, oh, like, come to the CrossFit gym with me. It's going to be awesome. And they were a very non-traditional type CrossFit gym. And I don't think Mark Valenti, the owner, really liked even calling himself a CrossFit gym. He was a world-class strongman Highland Games competitor. And so that's where my love of lifting really started. And we had Atlas stones, yokes, did a ton of like odd object type of stuff. And so that is when I really started getting into, the lifting aspect, the CrossFit style, conditioning, all that type of stuff. And so, yeah, after that, I, just started training. I did a couple Highland Games for fun. And when I moved to Pennsylvania, I joined a different gym, Legends Strength Warehouse, and, started to really start doing more CrossFit style workouts. I was lacking in the conditioning area. I feel like I just got very strong. I was not conditioning as much. And I'm like, all right, I need to get it in gear. And what I loved so much about CrossFit was just, how it embodies and optimizes physical competence in, strength, power, flexibility, endurance. And you can never be too good at any of those 10 things that CrossFit embodies. Started training there and whatnot. Didn't get really serious into CrossFit until probably 2 years ago. I'm like, all right, it's time to like start doing competitions, and, working on a lot of my weaknesses, which, I mean, check it out. I'm 6 feet tall. So a lot of CrossFit athletes are like 5'2", 5'5" range. And so I would get smoked in gymnastics, the chest to bars, the bar muscle ups, toes to bar. So actually the quarantine presented a really strong opportunity to work on my weaknesses. And I really just put my nose on the grindstone and spent, maybe 2 hours a day working on my weaknesses. And, the CrossFit Open came around. I'm like, all right, I've done it for several years in the past, never quite took it seriously, but I, wanted to take it seriously this time. And so, they take, let's say there's 100,000 people. I'm not sure how many women competed. I think it was like around 80,000 or so. The top 10% move on to quarterfinals. I placed in the top 1 or 2%. And then you have a long weekend to compete, a handful of workouts. I think it was like 6 or so. But I finished in a good spot, and I was really proud of, my hard work and resiliency and working on my weaknesses, because that's really what it took. And so I was happy with that. Had done some competitions after that. And before that, unfortunately, COVID threw a damper in the mix with some of our competitions being canceled. But yeah, just I love just being humbled every day and continuing to grow and push myself. So yeah, that's kind of my background and with how I got started into, playing different sports. And but I did pick up lacrosse pretty late. I was only a freshman in high school. And I could tell you a lot of funny stories just about how that all worked. But was really set on playing college basketball until I picked up a lacrosse stick. Our lacrosse coach in high school is now one of the men's lacrosse coaches at Denison, which is D3 powerhouse in the NCAC. So he kind of recruited me to come out, and I was so bad that I just became obsessed with it. I'm like, I need to figure out how to catch and throw. And yeah, just went home and I'm like, I think I want to play lacrosse in college. And just everything just stemmed from that. And now I just have an awesome opportunity to coach the game that I love every day. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know Denison pretty well. Salisbury's matched up with them quite a few times. Or I think we're still not allowed to play in Ohio. We find a neutral ground between it. It's them and Ohio Wesleyan, which we find neutral ground from.
Yeah, in Delaware, Ohio.
There's been some issues, yeah. But that's cool though, because trying to follow in your dad's footsteps and doing kind of tempting the waters with a lot of different sports and everything, and then kind of getting humbled and finding a new skill that you're not very good in, but you kind of put your nose to the grindstone and really try to figure out how to work this skill and how to perfect it. And it's cool to see that, like, even at the age you started to play lacrosse, like how you still found it. And like, I didn't start playing until my senior year of high school. And I didn't even play, but like all my friends had been involved in it. And there was only one team I knew that had it in North Carolina at the time. And so I didn't know a single person until I came back to Maryland. And I was like, I really want to do this. I don't care how late this is in the game. I want to do it. And it's been cool to kind of be a part of it ever since. So
definitely. It's such a fun blend of just so many different sports. And that's what in. I mean, it's just so dynamic, and it's so exciting.
I know it takes a lot of the fun things from every sport. I mean, quick line changes like hockey, the same field size as soccer, and like the dynamic running that you're going to get, like the same dodging as basketball. There's a lot of cool components that come out of it. I mean, you took those dodging abilities like to play at Fresno, and then after you hung it up, like I stopped running completely for a long time. So I know that feeling, but you found something that kind of had the same similarities like in CrossFit, where it takes some Olympic lifting, it takes some powerlifting, it takes some gymnastics and body awareness, different drills and conditioning. It kind of molds it all together. So that's cool to see it involved in. And I'm sure it pays huge dividends with like the athletes that you work with. I've seen it like when we work together here, which I want to get into later, but you kind of talked on a little bit, like your time first starting. I know you started at club level first and then Oberlin College and St. Francis. So how were those experiences kind of leading you up to now your new position as the head women's coach at the Savannah College of Art and Design?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have a super diverse background, from being on the club scene, working at a Division III school, coaching Division I for about seven or so years, and now in the NAIA, which has been, really fun to, learn more about this conference and everything of that nature. But yeah, landed my first coaching job at Oberlin College, and very similar to SCAD in the fact that is a very specialized college, high academic and very, very artsy. At SCAD, we call them our artist athletes. They are in the creative careers for a reason. They want to make an impact in the world in that regard, in fashion or architecture, a lot of different marketing degrees as well, and animation, illustration. It's just so eclectic and unique, and I love that uniqueness. It is very similar to Oberlin in that way, and there's a lot of discipline involved with them in their crafts, their specialized crafts, but also in the lacrosse field. Our team at Oberlin would dominate, and I was always like fascinated by it. I'm like, all right, so I didn't know much about Division III until coaching at that level. It certainly helped that my boss was a 4-time national champion at Northwestern, so I learned a lot from her. But yeah, so then got started I wanted to get back into coaching wanted to coach at the Division I level. So the time commitment wasn't great enough for me. I'm like, man, we only get 16 fall practices in D3. Like, no, we need to do this all the time. No, but got into coaching at St. Francis University. A goal of mine was to really, every culture is so different. So as I've continued to progress throughout my career, I've continually learned and applied different skill sets to, what makes a successful team culture, and a lot of trial and error involved with that. But at St. Francis really turned a kind of, struggling culture into a really cohesive culture that embodied family, blue collar, hard work, excellence on and off the field all around. So that was definitely a win for me, turning that program into a respected one in the Northeast Conference. The opportunity presented itself to come coach at my alma mater. I continually kind of turned it down as the years went on. So I'm like, man, that was, where I played. That's kind of that's my past. I don't want to relive any of my past. I didn't want it to feel anything like that, but I've always had a lot of Bulldog pride and spirit. So to come back and then lead the team into their final race this season as a program was really special, and everything happens for a reason. So I think you asked about how I've continually changed.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on it already, like just kind of discussing the different places and their nuances.
Yeah, something that stands out to me the most as far as, how I've changed throughout my coaching career, starting off pretty young at like 22, was I did early on feel the need to be like really buttoned up, and there's nothing wrong with being buttoned up. Of course we're going to be very professional in how we carry ourselves and the words that we use, but players want to know who you are as a person, and you gain so much more respect by showing, vulnerability. That's how you gain, like I touched on, a lot of trust as well, and respect, and, wearing your heart on your sleeve as well. I mean, I really, as I, progressed throughout my career, I started to show my student athletes more of me. And that's how I built stronger, more quality, genuine relationships. And so I've continued to utilize that in my coaching philosophy as, those components have always been, my why. My driving force is always my student athletes. And I'm always, going to have that team first, player first mentality. And then the second thing is kind of, early on in my career, I'm like, all right, we're going to win the NEC. We're going to, finish, over 500 winning percentage, whatever those might be, setting those goals. I'm like, okay, as time has gone on, these different expectations and goals need to be set by the team. And, in no way was I ever some sort of dictator. I'm always, super positive, encouraging, but I have learned that, player-led leadership initiatives are where it's at, and giving the student athletes the opportunity to create their culture, and, not saying, hey, we want to love each other and, genuinely care about each other. It's, what does that look like? What are the things that we do, to embody those values and creating that culture? So yeah, how I've, reconfigured my coaching style the past, 4 or 5 years has been really having a lot of conversations, and, sitting down with the team, what does the season look like to you? What do you want to accomplish? What do you care about? And how can we do these things together? And, really that promotes a ton of accountability as well. And so that is those are some of the ways of which I've changed throughout my career that have been really positive.
Yeah, I'd agree. That definitely does instill a lot of accountability and ownership when it becomes more player led than it's not even coach led. Sometimes it's coach like dictated, and you're really just telling them what you want to accomplish. And these are the goals set, and the players might have loftier goals, or they might have lesser goals, however you want to say it, but making sure that everybody's on the same page, I think that's huge. So It's cool to see, like, I think I was the same way, and most coaches are, when you start off so young and you can't just flip a switch from going from player right to coach. It's a hard line to draw. And I think most people either tend to be way too far as a friend and former teammate and don't want to really like disciplinary any people or draw hard lines. And then some people go the opposite way and they don't want to open up at all and show anything, like you said, because you want the line to be firm that you're the coach and they're the athlete and you're the player. So it's hard because once you start to like feel a little bit better, feel a little bit more comfortable with your coaching philosophy and like what you're actually doing, then you realize that's what needs to be done. There's a healthy balance, and they need to see that you're a human first before you're a person. You're not just a robot.
Yeah.
So,
because you put your coach on a pedestal. I remember in college, it's just like your coach's coach. It's not like, Nick O'Brien, the person. So it's nice to be able to build those relationships while maintaining, professionalism.
Yeah, for sure. You talked about it too, like the importance of like actually instilling a culture, and how every place you've been at kind of has its own embodiment of either the athletes that are kind of actively recruited, or it's the programs that are offered and the type of players you're going to get. But still, like with a team, you still have to kind of mold that culture and go through it. You've been with a lot of programs to kind of build your own philosophy and everything. Starting like a new program now, like stepping into a new position, like what are some of the really important things that help you instill that culture? I mean, in the first few days, in the first week or that first month, that really kind of set the tone for what you want for the season and for the program going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And then definitely two components of that, like within the athletic department and then from a team perspective as well. From an athletic department standpoint, I mean, day one involves introductions. It's super important. I made it a priority to go around, meet everybody face to face, shake their hand, say hello, make myself aware of what they do, what job they do, at SCAD, and how, what role they play within the department, and maybe how we could potentially assist one another. I think that's really important to build that relationship and that camaraderie there within an athletics department. Week one is kind of like the lay of the land, asking a ton of questions. Whoa. Clifford, no. Clifford, that's when you cut that out. Clifford, no. It's always the little ones too.
Yeah, they got little man syndrome.
Clifford, no. Woo. Yeah. Lay of the land, asking a ton of questions, what different policies and procedures, as far as gear ordering, recruiting, strategy, potentially talking with a bunch of other coaches, And then, by the first month, you're kind of hitting your groove, you're starting to feel more comfortable, all that sort of good stuff. So from a team perspective, building one-on-one relationships, super important in order to build that trust. And again, asking a lot of questions. What do you guys care about? What's important to you? And we just actually interviewed for our team captain position, which I think is really awesome. I wanted to establish those leaders pretty early on, so there's not any, no one's in limbo throughout the summer. There's that accountability, that leadership initiative there, and they're in small workout groups this summer, all that sort of good stuff. And so, yeah, I actually went through that process as a player and have done that as a coach probably for 3 or 4 years. I think it's awesome. And, it shows who wants to be in that type of leadership role. And they go through, it would be like a traditional interview. They submit cover letter, resume, which are others on the team. And then, their references in their resume. And so it was a fun process to go through. And, I just continually am getting to know them, and super new. I mean, we're 2 months into me being here, and continually learning. But I think those conversations are really important, and having those consistent conversations, and a lot of, team check-ins. I'll send like a weekly group me message focused on, this week was actually focused on stress reduction and kind of like self-care and what that looks like, and realizing we're never going to eliminate stress or anxiety completely, but being able to know yourself and explore different avenues in managing your stress. So little stuff like that, I think it's super, important, and it's engaging. I think being collaborative is really important. We just had a captain's meeting yesterday talking about team building activities we could potentially rock and roll with in the fall. Just getting creative, having a lot of different conversations.
I like it. I've never heard anybody talk about like the interview, like interviewing for captains. And
yeah,
I think that's a cool way to do it, even if it's not the first season, even if it's you've been in a 10th season somewhere, but to see who really wants to step into that role, or potentially maybe someone has a recommendation for someone else that they see fit, that maybe won't come out front and say that they want to do it. That's just not the type of person they are. But that's cool to kind of see. And especially like coming into it as your first year, they're trying to get a feel for you as much as you're trying to understand what you're stepping into. They want to know like what type of person you are, like what your expectations are. I think that often comes like as just uncommon knowledge that it's a two-way street between coaches and players, and whether it's in strength conditioning or sports, for sure. But no, I like that. That's cool. I'm going to have to steal that. But being able to like actually communicate with them and talk about more than just a sport, I think that really kind of dovetails everything, and it really helps out with the message you're trying to put across when it comes time to do something hard. And I know like with different levels and everything, like obviously like you have different access to like strength conditioning, and it's different rules, like Division 3, Division 1. I'm sure it's weird rules for NAIA just as much. But you have a very in-depth background. Like you're CrossFit Trainer certified, like you've been competing, you've gone through the Division 1 process as a player and a coach, so you understand what's entailed. But how has that background kind of helped prepare you for coaching lacrosse and some of the demands that are placed on it? And do you feel like, since you're continuing to still train and be involved in athletics yourself, that kind of benefits you as a coach, or it's relatable to your players?
Definitely. And I have just, every year gets better and better, I feel like, in so many different ways. But I've definitely developed, as the years have passed, a stronger eye for movement, more proficient with whatever type of lift we're coaching, whatever it might be, was really positive. Actually, my most recent CrossFit coaching stint was at CrossFit Fresno, and the owner, Rosanna Pagsanjan, she is a professor in the kinesiology department at Fresno State. So impeccable person, very, very technical. Really appreciated my time there. I was there for 2 years and went through like probably a 6-week period of which she shadowed me and made sure that I was, saying the right things, doing the right things, different points of performances. And I really appreciated the programming there. It mapped out everything in such a way that, you could not move poorly and be in that facility. Every coach, starting with our owners from the top with Rosanna, made sure, that everyone was well prepared to take on whatever workout it might be. And also those different scaling options and modifications, because CrossFit is an inclusive, environment and community where we welcome everybody, and there's something for everyone, which has always been super fun. But yeah, definitely have continued to develop a stronger eye for movement, mobility as well, making that a huge priority within the athletes that I coach and, myself. Also nutrition, pre-post workout, just macronutrients, whatever it might be, making sure we're eating enough. Too many athletes, they undereat and they restrict themselves. And so I'm continually deal with that over the past however many years, as far as we need to fuel to perform. You are an elite machine. And again, it's the same. Any strength coach, I'm sure, uses the metaphor or whatever it will, of like putting gas in your car. Like you don't want to be running on empty. And so, yeah, CrossFit and just, being in the strength conditioning setting as well, working with our strength coaches, asking a lot of questions has helped me a lot in that way. But, translating a lot of different CrossFit aspects onto the field. I know we talked a little bit about, power, strength, endurance. There are a lot of things that are CrossFit that we might not realize. And so what has been really fun for me over the past few years is implementing different like partner style workouts and little team competitions on the field, a lot of which will involve running, body weight, push-ups, plank holds, making sure that we have a strong base to build upon. I think that's really important. We're not ever, and as well as we're not ever going to just throw the athlete into the mix and say, all right, let's just we're going to do a 3-rep max snatch. Like anything I do with my lacrosse team is for the lacrosse athlete. And there's a lot of CrossFit things they should not be doing. They could wait until they graduate for all of that, but it's very specialized. And as throughout the years, as well as I've gone through, different programs, it's been awesome to see the growth in the strength conditioning field and just new implementations and training. Because, probably in 2014-15, wherever I was, a lot of the team's programming would be like exactly the same. And, of course, there's some really solid fundamentals in the mix there, but we need to be sports specific. And so developing a greater awareness of what that looks like for the lacrosse player has been really, really fun. And yeah, CrossFit has definitely helped me in a lot of different ways. And also just being adaptive with CrossFit, going to the gym, you just never know. And with the open and different workouts that I've completed and competed in, you just don't know what it's going to be until you step on the floor. I mean, you just got to be ready. And so that is a huge component that I really value is, being adaptive and then resilient, really just not letting anything get you down. You gotta keep fighting. And so just fostering that competitive spirit and, the team first mentality of, I want to line up next to the fastest people on the field, just, again, foster that competitive fire and little stuff like that. Yeah.
No, that's cool. That's you kind of answered my next question anyway, like actually finding ways, like, is it appropriate to put CrossFit kind of type workouts within like a college setting? And like you said there, I mean, when any implementation, whether it be sports or strength conditioning, there's always it depends. And like what you're going to do at SCAD versus what we do at Fresno State versus someone else does. Like there's so many different confounding variables that's going to change. So yeah, there's definitely a time and place for anything in there. Mm-hmm. And it's cool to see like what you're able to take away from your own training and competitive experience, like in the CrossFit, like box style, be able to at least take bits and pieces of it to the lacrosse field and to the players, but also like, I think the biggest thing, what people, their connotation of it is not getting carried away. And now, because CrossFit as a sport, there is a sport side to it. There's a fitness side to it. So not taking the sport and trying to train a sport, the same as like people really just trying to take weightlifting movements, and that's a sport, put so much of that into an athlete and train an athlete for a different sport. So finding like that healthy balance of where you can like cherry pick things from different programs or from different kind of like disciplines and strength sports. I think that's the most important thing.
Definitely.
So you kind of touched on it a little bit, since you do have such a background, like with the coaching side of it, like with the sports side, and then with like just the own training side. What would you say, like a coach that might not have as much experience in both of these things? Because you're not going to find a lot of people that are kind of equally balanced on both sides, that can sit in on a conversation with a strength coach and for the most part understand 95% of what they're talking about and what they're going to be doing to take care of their team. And then on the same thing, like a strength coach being able to go out to practice and understand like what style of defense you're running, like what's the reason for this drill. Like for someone that doesn't have such a well-rounded background, maybe as a sport coach, like how do they kind of best educate themselves on the sports performance side? And then for like a strength coach, how would you say them to best kind of educate themselves learning the sport?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think first and foremost, like having and developing a really strong relationship between, your strength staff, athletic training, and the sports staff. I mean, we're a team in ourselves. So really embodying that and having the team's best interest, of course, as a priority. But I think I already said it a little bit, but just asking a ton of questions. You got to ask a lot of questions and, put your pride aside because you don't know what you don't know. And we can be collaborative in a lot of different ways to progress our athletes and support them in the best way possible. So with that, I would say from like, either perspective, maybe from your perspective, I see you do this all the time, is like coming out to practice, whether, it's on the basketball court, on the lacrosse field, and actually, learning through observation as well, while asking those different questions. am totally open to that as a coach. And I really want to be and aim to be present in the weight room for different sessions. And, like while the strength coach is putting a summer workout packet together, it's like, all right, how you will learn is asking those questions like, okay, why are we doing a 300-yard shuttle? What are the benefits of that for the lacrosse athlete? Or, is a timed mile a positive test to use? Little stuff like that, and why the whys or why nots. And that's how you effectively learn it, by asking those specific questions. But then, as I touched on, your presence out on, the court or the playing field. What does a midfielder look like as opposed to what a defender looks like? What are their sport-specific needs? That midfielder probably has a higher anaerobic threshold than a defender potentially. And, how we develop that skill set and those foundations. Maybe a defender, a need for them is having some really strong footwork to play that 1v1 defense, that help defense, whatever it might be. So that agility component and that need. So recognizing how dynamic the sport can be and this position specific need. And oh my gosh, we could probably go down the list of, football. I mean, the alignment as opposed to a wide receiver and those different training needs. So yeah, I would say that just the importance of those relationship building components, always being a student of, your craft. And, I'm always continually learning as a coach, in my lacrosse background, and the game is changing every year. I mean, we just changed our game from a 90-second shot clock to 60, and we're continually adapting and changing. So I think, just putting your pride aside and asking a ton of questions. And there's just so many different resources There's so many different, I love podcasts. There's so many different podcasts, because how often is someone going to actually sit, and read a book? And there's so many different things that are so outdated as well. So it's human interactions through conversations and observations on, that respected playing field.
I like that. Yeah, that's cool to kind of hear. And I mean, from our time working together, just kind of going back and forth, like me being able to go out to practice and kind of see, because you said it, like if I hadn't played lacrosse, then it was going to take a lot more time for me to realize what was going on. And I needed to ask a lot of questions. But even knowing like from my own personal experience, I still ask a bunch of questions like, all right, what style, like what in your scheme and system, tactically and technically, like what is a midfielder's role? Like I know what a midfielder's job is, and I know like restrictions of the game and like the different fundamentals that need to be like performed, like all the skills. But what specifically in your style of play is it going to make a successful midfielder? Like there's still a ton of questions that need to be asked.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
from going from place to place, that's you're going to play a different style. You're going to have access to different players, different skill sets, different conferences. Like those things are always fluid and changing. But for you to kind of just stay up front on everything, I think that's huge. And I know when coaches come into the weight room and like actually observe or know what's going on or even push the athletes, like that drives them up more. I remember you coming in one time and the girls were doing core, and they're like, oh shit, Kara's here. And now like we have to do it. I was like, you had to do it before. It just looks worse if you don't do it, and I have to yell at you. So now you don't get yelled at.
I think I might have jumped in that day.
I think so. Yeah, it helped. I think it helps a little bit. It certainly builds a lot of buy-in with the players. And I've said this a bunch of times with people probably on here as well. But I think that when a coach and a coaching staff is coming into the weight room at least every once in a while, or really like emphasizes that, whether saying, hey, you're going to lifts, we really put an emphasis on coming in for lifts, then it becomes such a priority for them. And it's not just a have to sort of thing, like, or reluctantly. It's this is something that we need to do. This is important just as much as practice is important at some points of the year. So I think that really is a huge component for sure.
Definitely.
Hey, so with everything, you kind of talked about some of the resources and everything you have, and like what you kind of listen to and how you kind of stay up to date with continuing education and stuff. Knowing everything you kind of know now, how would you approach strength training and preparation for lacrosse if you were like Kara's freshman year coach? Like you got to go back and redo it. Like would you change anything? Would you add anything? Like, or would you kind of keep it the same?
That's a good question. I definitely, like I said, didn't have really a lifting background. And I touched on like taking a lot of pride in my strength training, because I realized the importance of it as far as, sustainability, injury prevention goes. And then, the competitive aspect of it, we're all bantering around in there. But what I would change, my nutrition, I've told the story a million times of how in our dining hall, we had a cereal bar, and that is exactly what I would eat for breakfast. Only Reese's Puffs right before and after lift, just like 6 bowls of Reese's Puffs. Like that is horrible. Like the protein, you need protein. All my players laugh at me. They're like, oh, there's coach probably with her hard-boiled eggs and like protein powder and on the plane. But like just the preparation component of me as a freshman, I would go back in that. I would pay more mind to my nutrition from a strength training aspect. I think everything that we did was pretty positive and productive in that way. And I really appreciated our athletic training staff as well, and doing FMS testing. I wasn't firing my right glutes, and so something of that nature. And so going through some prehab, was awesome for me in strengthening, my hamstrings, and everything is tied in together. Hamstrings, your low back, your core, and recognizing the importance of prehab and taking that more seriously in our pre and post, and practice or lift, whatever it might be, or conditioning sessions. That would be something I would change too, is aside from nutrition. It's and now I definitely can't just like leave the gym or leave the field and be feeling awesome. We need to do some type of, mobility or recovery. So I would take that more seriously, because you'll pay for it in the long run. Yeah, but those are some of the things that I would say. And then also just getting out of your comfort zone more. That's something I learned, and it's what's made me a better athlete as I get older. It's just like, I feel like I've just become more fearless, and I know it's going to hurt, and just like, you don't want to sound like a total hardo and like, push yourself to the limit or whatever it might be, but getting out of your comfort zone and realizing like there are going to be other athletes that are fast like you, that are also strong. So how are you going to separate yourself? And a lot of times that means summer spent seeing your shadow, countless repetitions, and putting the hard work in when no one's watching. I was always willing to do that, but I think, paying even more mind to that and recognizing when I could push a little harder or be more disciplined in making the conditioning aspect, the prehab, strength training aspect a priority in order to ensure, ultimate success on the playing field.
Right. Yeah. At that point, you're trying to squeeze out like small percentages and really just kind of supplement all the work you're doing. Cause I think most people come in, like they just expect that all you have to do is really practice. Okay. Practice, lift. All right. That's maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 hours of your day. Like, what are you doing with the other 20, 22 hours of the day? That's really what is going to make or break your career. And I mean, 18 to 22-year-old kids, like you could get away with eating Reese Puffs every single day. It's probably not optimal. At some point, hopefully you like outgrow that taste, maybe. But to really train at a high level and to be prepared as much as possible, like there's got to be some sacrifices and some changes made. And I think you made a good point, and I wanted to ask you about this because you're on the recruiting side. Like as a strength coach, we just see, we get to meet with recruits a lot of times, but we don't really get to see like the potential of who never comes in. We only get to see who actually commits to us. Like, are you seeing a lot more people come in really prepared or even less prepared, or is it still kind of like a mixed bag of people prepared for like freshman year of college, like from a training aspect or even like a skill level aspect for lacrosse?
Yeah, I mean, lacrosse, the stick skills that I'm seeing on the recruiting trail are like better than ever. And the younger and younger they go too. It's insane, but it's amazing. I mean, it's just their background coming from these, whatever, wherever they're coming from starts with, the good coaches. And I think we're getting more good coaches within lacrosse. So that's been really positive. I'm seeing a little bit of both. And, I know I touched on it maybe a little bit, but every college player was the best on their team, right? So they come to college and they're like, wow, you get kind of, it's eye-opening a little bit. So like, all right, my 70%, 80% that was crushing everybody in high school is, I'm in like the middle of the pack right now. I have seen a mix of both though, like I kind of touched on. I've had a lot of awesome young kids come in that are just ready to make their mark and set the tone and are not afraid, to compete and assert their dominance in that way, because it's anyone's starting position, whatever you will. So equal opportunity. But I'm seeing a mix of both. It's wild to me how many, and even, now, no matter what division, how many female athletes cannot perform a proper bodyweight squat or cannot do push-ups, can't hold a plank for a minute. Those little things, the statistics, I would say, I would confidently say like over 70 to 80% of the players I've coached throughout, 8 years or whatever, that's the statistics of, the inefficiencies. And it's wild to see. So we'll do that at practice plenty of times. But, you're talking more about the freshman athlete. And like I said, just depends on their background, where they're coming from. I've seen a mixture of both. There's the, ready to compete and dominate. And then there's the kind of like entitled, potentially lacrosse player that's like, oh, I'm here now, I'm just going to coast, whatever that might look like.
Yeah, I think you definitely get a mix of everything, but I think what you made a good point, like getting at, like if you could go back and change, you would get out of your comfort zone and more. And I think a lot of players, like you said, are the best on their team, and they kind of come in and they don't realize that there's going to be a wholesale change, that everybody's really good now, and you kind of have to step your game up. And I think challenging yourself and like going through some of the trials and tribulations of either trying a different sport, getting involved in like weight training, strength training before you get in, or just doing something different is, I mean, yeah, you're going to fail a bunch of times, but I'd rather be failing at those things in the shadows. And then when you actually get to a team and you get to college, like you have confidence and you're able to like jump over these hurdles a lot easier. So you see those with all the players, and those ones really fade out really quick. And I feel like that's what really separates some of like the higher level teams that continue to be successful, besides the fact that they always kind of like recruit for those type of people, but they're recruiting people that aren't afraid to fail. They're confident. They're not afraid to like be on the fourth line for whatever reason. Like they're willing to push themselves even more, and that only pushes the players in front of them, and it challenges them to be competitive and competitive more. So that's definitely cool. But you talked about it, like obviously now in your position, like you have to wear a lot more hats. So I think it's huge to be able to like talk to them about nutrition, talk to your players about, like you said, like some of that stressfulness and mindfulness, and trying to manage some of those things, because you're not going to be able to we're not going to be able to eliminate them completely. But I think those things outside of just lacrosse, outside of just training, would you say that a lot of your continued competitive experience and your like experience in CrossFit and then just being a player yourself helps you more so? And like, can you describe a little bit more so of how involved you have to be at like a Division III and NAIA level? Because I mean, you probably don't have a full-time dietitian, a full-time strength coach, like a full-time athletic trainer, full-time mental skills, like all these things. It kind of falls on you to be the holistic leader. So do those like you training help in those aspects as well?
Yeah, no, I definitely think it does. And from a nutrition standpoint, a mental, sports psychology standpoint, there's just so many things. And again, it comes through, trials and tribulations, and what works, what doesn't work, what is scientifically proven, what is accredited and what's a fad. And it's because I've tried a bunch of different things myself to know like what works and what doesn't work. And I was working with a nutritionist via RP Strength for a while. And so I'm looking at a piece of food. I'm like, that has 26 grams of protein in it. Like, it's just like eyeing different things out. And no, but it sounds so goofy. But I think it definitely helps be able to talk about nutrition. And because, from working with someone and being able to relay that information on, and having the different Excel spreadsheets that I have of this random stuff, with different whole foods and the micronutrients and importance of, getting enough protein. I'm always talking about protein, Nick. Get enough protein. No, but so wearing many hats, it's totally doable. But again, always speaking my truth, and you don't know what you don't know. So if I don't know something, I'm not going to pretend like I do. I'm going to figure it out and find it out and ask for help, not afraid to ask for help. And, so with that, I know that, being at a smaller school in the strength conditioning field, probably true that you're understaffed. So I have been, working on programming with our strength coach and being collaborative in what they have done in the past, what we'd like to see change, and, looking from an injury perspective too, why did these 3 injuries happen? And little stuff like that. So it definitely takes a little bit more of extra work and greater communication. But again, yeah, comfortable in doing whatever it might be to make sure that our team is well taken care of.
That's awesome. Yeah, I would argue to say that anybody that has gone through the process and trains and that is at a smaller school, you're in a much better position because you're the go-to person for those athletes when some of those departments and resources are not as readily accessible as a bigger university. So that's awesome that you're able to at least take from some of those experiences you have or some of those things that you've actually experienced yourself and be able to divulge that information and decipher it to the athletes in some sort of easier bite-sized way, even if it's just protein facts.
All you get to eat is protein. No?
Hey, it's good advice still nonetheless. But hey, so any good training session, we finish the show with a good old finisher. So I got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and CrossFit's always overtime. So we'll go right into overtime at the end. But we can do them rapid fire, or you could take as much time as you want. But are you ready?
Oh, man. I'm ready.
Last bit. So,
all right. So question, favorite animal. If you could be an animal, what would you be?
I mean, that one might be in there. Dream I don't location, think it is, though.
Dream vacation.
Those are good ones, though. We could throw one of those in there just because. But first one I got for you. Biggest influence in lacrosse and biggest or favorite athlete in CrossFit.
Ooh, biggest influence in lacrosse. Sue Beam. She was who recruited me at Fresno State. She just she owns a club in Rochester called Monster. She really cared about me as a person. This is supposed to be short and rapid fire.
No,
she really cared about me as a person.
You could take as long as you need.
Yeah, and that's what I love so much about her. And she's still checking in with me to this day, even though I didn't get to be coached by her. Sue Beam, such a joyful soul who genuinely loved each and every one of us. Favorite CrossFit athletes? Oh, I got to say Bethany Shadburn with the affiliation with Randy as well. I'm definitely feeling for her because she just tested positive for COVID and had to withdraw. But I just think she's a class act, super humble, but is an absolute workhorse. And so, yeah, she definitely is my favorite.
Yeah, that was a bummer to hear. I talked to Randy about it. I hope she's doing well and she can bounce back. All right. So you could take as long as you want. Don't worry. All right. What can you be found doing when you're not coaching or competing? What are some of your go-to hobbies, either Georgia related or not?
Ooh, well, we have 3 dogs, 2 German Shepherds and a wiener dog. Montana, Ruby, and Clifford, and they require a lot of attention, especially Montana. She's the puppy, very needy. So we hike a lot. We go on a lot of walks. Yesterday I was on the bike with Montana and Johnny was on the skateboard with Ruby. So that's what you'll find us doing, trying to keep them entertained, keeping the dogs in shape. I love music. I love music too. So I'm really excited for live concerts to be happening again. Don't really have one planned next. But hiking, being outdoors, music, I'd say
nice.
Up to.
I already got mine booked for the summer. So if you weren't coaching lacrosse, what do you think you would be doing as a career? And if you weren't involved in CrossFit after lacrosse, what sport do you think you would have picked?
Ooh, this dream job, I would be in a band. I would be the front runner of a band, lead singer, 10 out of 10 times, travel the world. Oh my gosh, I would love to be in a band. And then your second question was
any sport to go pro in.
Any sport to go pro. Whew. Tennis. I would pick tennis. It's such an awesome stage, especially for female athletes. I feel like you know, man, I never really played a ton of individual sports. I've always been involved in team sports for a chunk of change in my lifetime. But I think it would be fun to compete in tennis and be in Wimbledon. And, they're like, oh, you need to wear white. And I'm like, nope, I'm going to wear neon. And then they find me, but then everyone starts wearing neon and then it's a new thing.
All right. There's your dream right there. All right. So setting up an ideal training day for yourself, what's your go-to training music or PR song? And what's your go-to best post-training meal?
Oh, okay. That's a lot of questions in one.
That's 2 questions in one.
It's music for the training session.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm playing all sorts of stuff. My favorite type of what I listen to in my everyday life and what I train to, totally different. But what I'll like train to, a lot of high intensity type of songs, a lot of electronic songs. Oh my goodness. I really like Bass Nectar. Man, I just was looking on my SoundCloud playlist yesterday too, and was reminded of all these like different songs that I had forgotten about, but I need to tap back into my SoundCloud. Oh goodness. AC/DC is always a good staple. That's always playing around the gym, but I'd say more of like electronic type songs. A specific song, I can't think of that. We were joking around yesterday, Johnny and I, about what our like boxing or UFC walkout song would be. And the one that I like chose, I don't even know the name of it or the artist. I'd have to go back and look, but it's it seems really dark, but it's just really intense. Post training. Oh, and for the PR song, I'm not even listening to the music at that point. I'm like, just get it up. Post training meal. Oh man, in a world where like, macros, all that stuff doesn't count, recovery doesn't matter, I'm going burrito style, just crazy burrito, like smothered in cheese and just all the Mexican food I could get my hands on.
All right.
But yeah, can't go wrong with any sort of Mexican food. But we can work that in either way.
Georgian Mexican food. Got it.
Haven't found a good spot yet. So
I've figured yet. All right, last one I got for you for overtime. Favorite either competition memory or favorite coaching memory?
Oh, man, favorite coaching memory, I would have to say, and you were a part of it, was beating SDSU, upsetting SDSU and competing and playing in our first ever MPSF championship at Fresno to cap off our season. That was my favorite coaching moment ever. I remember towards the end of the game, my eyes are like watering because we're just, the margin is pretty great at that point in time. And I'm like, don't cry. And Hannah Kratz, she runs by. She's like, man, after the game, she's like, I saw you about to cry. Like, I couldn't look at you. But that was the best. Oh, that was the best. Favorite coaching moment.
Yeah, that was a really good one. That was a cool like culmination of the whole season, and to cap it off for the team, that was pretty special for that being basically a program record. That was the first time ever, and I'm happy for them. That was definitely special. So
happy that you were a part of it. That was the best.
That was cool. I was stoked. I love beating them so much.
I know, anything. Me too.
Oh, awesome. Hey, so for anybody that's got more questions about lacrosse, CrossFit, anything like that, want to get a hold of you, how can they follow you? Yeah.
All right. Well, I am not a big social media user. I don't really use Twitter or Facebook, but I am pretty active on my Instagram, and my Instagram is K_check, which is CHECK, and then V8. So K_check V8 on the gram.
I got you covered. We'll link everything for that. Like I said, congrats on the new spot and the hyphen addition to the name. Give Johnny my best.
But both families.
But I appreciate you coming on today. It was great to catch up. Obviously, like our big Fresno connection, working together, like sharing that awesome coaching memory.
Yeah.
I can't thank you enough for coming on today and sharing with the rest of the audience.
Thank you so much, Nick. I appreciate it. I had so much fun with you today.
Of course. Good luck this season, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. You too, Nick.
See ya.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors, Cerberus Strength. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.